A 63-year-old tech mogul steps onto a gala stage just as two young black doctors enter the room. Twins, confident, brilliant. When they speak, the entire room holds its breath. And when they say his name, he nearly collapses. The truth they reveal will dismantle everything he thought he built. Take a breath and enjoy the story. Ralph Wittmann stood at the edge of the hospital room, his hands trembling as he stared at the two newborn babies sleeping peacefully in their incubators. His face was pale, his brow slick with sweat, and a sick feeling was coiling in his stomach. The nurse had just left after explaining that his wife had suffered complications during the birth and would need several more days to recover. But that wasn't what had him frozen in place, unable to move closer to the twins that had just been born. "They can't be mine," he whispered to the empty room, his voice cracking. The twins, with their beautiful brown skin, were undeniably not his biological children. Richard, with his pale complexion and blonde hair, knew immediately that his wife had been unfaithful. The betrayal cut deep, especially now, as he was on the verge of the biggest business deal of his career, a merger that would make his technology company one of the most influential in the country. Hook, what shocking revelation will change their lives forever? A scandal like this would ruin everything. When Marge, his wife, had announced her pregnancy, Ralph had been overjoyed. At 35, he had finally felt ready for fatherhood, eager to create the family he'd never had growing up. But now, looking at these boys who couldn't possibly be his, all those dreams crumbled around him. Mr. Wittmann, a doctor, entered the room, her expression composed, but sympathetic. "Your wife is asking for you." Ralph nodded mechanically and followed her to Marge's room. The sight of his wife pale and weak in the hospital bed should have filled him with concern. Instead, all he could feel was the burning sense of betrayal. "Richard," Marge whispered, her eyes filled with tears. "Have you seen them? Aren't they beautiful? Who is he?" Ralph demanded, his voice low and trembling with barely controlled rage. Marge's face went blank with confusion. "What?" "The father," Ralph clarified, his knuckles white as he gripped the edge of her bed. "Who is he, Marge?" Understanding dawned in her eyes, followed swiftly by horror. "You think Richard?" "No, they're yours." The doctors explained this could happen. "It's called mixed-race twins. My grandmother was black, remember? I told you about her." Ralph shook his head, unwilling to listen. In his mind, the timing was too convenient, the explanation too far-fetched. His company was worth millions now, and the merger would make it worth billions. Marge had access to all of it as his wife. "I want a divorce," he said coldly. "And I want nothing to do with those children." "Richard, please," Marge begged, tears streaming down her face. "They're yours. We can get a DNA test. Please don't do this." But Ralph had already made up his mind. Within a week, he had moved out of their home and filed for divorce, leaving Marge alone with the twins. He offered her a settlement, enough money that she would never have to worry about finances, but with one condition. She would never tell anyone, especially the boys, that he was their father. Marge, heartbroken and still recovering from childbirth, had no fight left in her. She took the settlement and moved across the country with her sons Elijah and Isaiah. 28 years later, Ralph Wittmann stood at the podium of the Grand Ballroom in the Ritz-Carlton, surveying the sea of faces before him. At 63, he was now one of the most powerful men in the technology industry. His company, Wittmann Innovations, a household name around the world. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice commanding the attention of every person in the room. "I welcome you to the 15th Annual Wittmann Innovations Charity Gala. Tonight, we celebrate not only the technological advancements that have changed our world, but also our commitment to giving back to the communities that have supported us on our journey." The applause was thunderous, the admiration in the room palpable. Ralph Wittmann had carefully crafted his public image over the years. The brilliant entrepreneur who had built an empire from nothing. The generous philanthropist who donated millions to children's charities. The respected businessman who had never married, claiming he was married to his work. Few knew the truth, that he had abandoned his wife and newborn sons nearly 3 decades ago out of pride, prejudice, and baseless suspicion. Tonight, I'm especially proud to announce our newest initiative, the Wittmann Future Leaders Program, which will provide full scholarships to promising young students from underprivileged backgrounds. More applause followed his announcement, but Ralph barely heard it. His attention had been caught by his assistant, who was frantically waving at him from the side of the stage. Concluding his opening remarks quickly, Ralph stepped away from the podium and approached her. "What is it, Lucille?" he asked, irritated by the interruption. "Mr. Wittmann, there's been a change to the program," she explained nervously. "The keynote speakers have arrived early and they're requesting to meet with you before they go on." Ralph frowned. The keynote speakers for the evening were supposed to be representatives from a successful startup that Wittmann Innovations was considering acquiring, a brilliant pair of twin brothers who had created groundbreaking software that could revolutionize medical diagnostics. "Can't it wait until after their speech? I have donors to speak with." Lucille shook her head. "They were very insistent, sir. They're waiting in the green room now." With a sigh of resignation, Ralph nodded and followed Lucille through the backstage area to the green room. When she opened the door, he froze in the doorway, his blood turning to ice in his veins. Standing before him were two young men, identical in appearance with the same strong jawline, intelligent eyes, and confident posture. They wore perfectly tailored suits and expressions that he couldn't quite read. But what struck him most was how familiar they looked, like seeing ghosts from his past brought to life. "Mr. Wittmann," one of them said, stepping forward with an outstretched hand. "I'm Dr. Elijah Johnson, and this is my brother, Dr. Isaiah Johnson. We're your keynote speakers tonight." The names confirmed what Ralph already knew in his heart. These were his sons, the children he had abandoned all those years ago, now standing before him as accomplished men. And from the look in their eyes, they knew exactly who he was to them. "How did you find me?" Ralph whispered, his voice barely audible as the room seemed to spin around him. Isaiah's smile was small and enigmatic. "That's an interesting first question from a father meeting his sons after 28 years, don't you think?" The world, as Ralph knew it, was about to change forever, and there was nowhere for him to run. Ralph stumbled backward, gripping the doorframe to steady himself. His heart hammered against his ribs, and for a moment, he feared he might have a heart attack right there in the green room. "How?" he tried again, his mouth dry. "How did you find out about me?" Elijah and Isaiah exchanged a glance, a silent communication passing between them that spoke of years of shared understanding. It was Elijah who stepped forward, his posture relaxed, but his eyes sharp with intelligence. "Mom never told us if that's what you're wondering," Elijah said, his voice calm and measured. "She kept her promise to you until the day she died." Ralph flinched at the mention of Marge's death. "Marge is gone," Isaiah confirmed, his expression softening slightly at the memory of their mother. 5 years ago, breast cancer. She fought hard, but in the end, he trailed off, the pain still evident in his voice. A wave of shame washed over Richard. He hadn't known. He hadn't checked. After the divorce, he had deliberately pushed all thoughts of Marge and the twins from his mind, focusing entirely on building his empire. Even when his company had grown powerful enough that he could have easily found out about them without Marge ever knowing, he had chosen not to look. "I'm sorry," Ralph said inadequately, the words feeling hollow even to his own ears. "Are you?" Isaiah's question was gentle but direct, his gaze unwavering. Before Ralph could respond, the door to the green room opened again and Lucille poked her head in. "Mr. Wittmann, I'm sorry to interrupt, but you're needed for the donor photos in 5 minutes. Ralph nodded, relieved at the interruption. "I'll be right there." Turning back to the twins, he attempted to regain his composure. "We clearly have much to discuss, but this isn't the time or place. Perhaps after the gala." "Actually," Elijah cut in smoothly. "Our keynote speech is scheduled for 20 minutes from now. We've prepared something quite relevant to the evening's theme. We think you'll find it illuminating." There was something in Elijah's tone that made Richard's stomach clench with apprehension. "What exactly are you planning to say?" Isaiah smiled, but the expression didn't reach his eyes. "You'll have to wait and see, just like everyone else. Don't worry, Mr. Wittmann. We're professionals." Ralph felt trapped. These young men before him, his sons, were now holding all the cards. If they chose to expose him publicly tonight, to reveal how the great philanthropist Ralph Wittmann had abandoned his own children, his reputation would be irreparably damaged. The irony wasn't lost on him. A man who funded children's charities around the world, revealed as someone who couldn't even care for his own sons. "I have a right to know what you're going to say about me," Ralph insisted, his voice lower but more urgent. "Rights?" Elijah raised an eyebrow. Interesting choice of words from someone who signed away his parental rights without a second thought. Ralph blanched. "How did you find out about you?" Isaiah finished his question. "You're not exactly a low-profile figure, Mr. Wittmann. Your face is on the cover of business magazines. Your name is on buildings. And when two mixed-race brothers with no father figure out they have a genetic condition that runs exclusively through their paternal line." Genetic condition, Richard's concern was genuine. "What condition?" "Hypertrophic cardiomyopathy," Elijah explained. "It's a heart condition. Mild in our case, but it required treatment. We needed to know our family medical history. So we did some digging." Isaiah continued. "DNA tests, medical records, and eventually court documents." Ralph felt the weight of his past decisions crushing down on him. "Those records were sealed." "Yes, they were," Elijah agreed, "but were nothing if not persistent, a trait we apparently inherited from you." The reminder of their biological connection sent another jolt through Richard. Looking at them now, he could see himself in them. In the shape of their eyes, the set of their jawlines, the way they stood with quiet confidence. How could he have ever doubted they were his? "I made a terrible mistake," Ralph admitted. The words forcing themselves out before he could consider the consequences. "When you were born, I didn't understand how genetics worked. I saw your skin color and assumed that our mother had cheated on you." Isaiah finished for him again. "Yes, we figured that out. Mixed-race twins are rare, but hardly unheard of. A simple DNA test would have confirmed the truth. But you weren't interested in the truth, were you?" Elijah's voice hardened. "You were interested in protecting your company and your reputation." Ralph couldn't deny it. In his youth, ambition had consumed him, making him blind to everything else. "I was wrong," he said simply. "Yes, you were," Isaiah agreed. "And yet, look at all you've accomplished. Wittmann Innovations, the charitable foundation, all this success." He gestured around them at the opulent surroundings. There was something in his tone that Ralph couldn't quite decipher. Was it admiration, resentment, both? "We've done well for ourselves, too," Elijah added as if reading Richard's thoughts. "Mom made sure of that. She worked 3 jobs to put us through good schools. She never let us feel like we were missing anything." "She never spoke ill of you either," Isaiah said. "When we asked about our father, she would only say that he wasn't able to be part of our lives, but that he had made sure we would be taken care of." The revelation stunned Richard. After everything he had done, Marge had protected his image in the eyes of their sons. The guilt he felt intensified, making it hard to breathe. "And were you," he asked hoarsely, "taken care of financially?" Elijah shrugged. "The settlement was generous. I'll give you that. But money doesn't raise children, Mr. Wittmann." Ralph winced at the formal address. These were his sons, his flesh and blood. Yet they spoke to him as if he were a stranger, which he realized with a sharp pang he was. "What do you want from me?" Ralph finally asked, cutting to the heart of the matter. "Why reveal yourselves now after all these years?" The twins shared another of their silent communications before Isaiah answered. "Initially, we were just curious. We wanted to see the man who had walked away from us, to understand why, but then we learned about your foundation's work with abandoned and orphaned children, and the irony was too much to ignore. When the opportunity came to speak at your gala, we couldn't pass it up," Elijah continued. "We become somewhat well known in our field. Your company has been courting our startup for months without realizing who we were." Of course, Richard's mind raced back through the acquisition reports he'd reviewed. Johnson & Johnson Medical Technologies. The name had seemed so generic that he hadn't given it a second thought. Now, the significance hit him like a physical blow. "Your startup," he said slowly. "The diagnostic software, that's you." Both brothers nodded, a hint of pride visible in their expressions. "The software that can detect early signs of cancer with 95% accuracy, saving thousands of lives," Isaiah confirmed, "including potentially lives like our mother's, had it been available sooner." The door opened again, and Lucille appeared once more. "Mr. Wittmann, the photographers are waiting." "Tell him I'll be there in a moment," Ralph said, not taking his eyes off his sons. When Lucille hesitated, he added more firmly, "Give me 5 minutes, Lucille. Please." After she left, Ralph took a deep breath. "I need to know what you're planning. If you're going to expose me, expose you?" Elijah tilted his head slightly. "Is that what you're afraid of? That we're here for some public revenge? Aren't you?" Ralph asked, genuinely uncertain. "We haven't decided yet," Isaiah said, his voice neutral. "That depends largely on what happens in the next few hours." "What does that mean?" "It means," Elijah explained, "that we're giving you a chance to do the right thing." For once, the implication hung in the air between them. Richard's mind raced through the possibilities. What did they want? Money? Recognition? A public apology? "I don't understand," he admitted, feeling completely out of his depth. "What is the right thing in this situation?" Isaiah checked his watch. "You're needed for those photos, and we need to prepare for our speech. Perhaps you should use this time to figure out what being a father means to you, even after all these years. Because tonight," Elijah added, his voice dropping to ensure only Ralph could hear, "your past and your present are about to collide in front of 500 of your closest business associates and friends. The only question is whether you'll be standing tall when the dust settles or buried beneath the rubble of the life you've built on lies." With that, both brothers turned away, effectively dismissing him from their presence. Ralph stood frozen for a moment longer, then stumbled out of the room on legs that felt as weak as a newborn's. As he made his way toward the waiting photographers, a cold realization settled in his chest. For the first time in decades, Ralph Wittmann was no longer in control of his carefully constructed world, and his sons, the ones he had denied and abandoned, now held his fate in their hands. Ralph moved through the gala like a man in a trance. He smiled for the photographs, shook hands with donors, and exchanged pleasantries with business partners, but his mind was elsewhere. Trapped in that green room with the twin sons he had abandoned nearly 3 decades ago as he mechanically performed his duties as host. Fragments of memory assaulted him. Marge's face when he had accused her of infidelity. The twins tiny and innocent in their hospital bassinets. The divorce papers signed without hesitation. The relief he had felt when it was all behind him and he could focus solely on building Wittmann Innovations. "Richard, are you all right?" The concerned voice of Cynthia Chen, his company's CFO and one of his oldest friends, broke through his thoughts. "I'm fine," he lied automatically, forcing another smile. "Just a little tired." Cynthia raised an eyebrow, clearly not believing him. "You look like you've seen a ghost." "Something like that," Ralph murmured, his eyes drifting toward the stage where preparations for the keynote speech were underway. "The Johnson brothers are quite impressive, aren't they?" Cynthia followed his gaze. "Their diagnostic software is revolutionary. It would be a significant acquisition for us." Ralph nodded absently. "What do you know about them personally?" "I mean, not much," Cynthia admitted. "They're notoriously private. Raised by a single mother who passed away a few years ago. No father in the picture. Brilliant minds. They both finished medical school by 24, then went on to develop their software. They've turned down multiple buyout offers from larger companies." She gave him a curious look. "Why the sudden interest in their personal lives?" "I thought you were only concerned with their technology." "Just doing my due diligence," Ralph said, trying to sound casual. Before Cynthia could press further, the lights dimmed slightly and the event coordinator took the stage to introduce the keynote speakers. Richard's heart rate accelerated as he watched Elijah and Isaiah walk confidently to the podium, their matching strides a reminder of their shared DNA, his DNA. "Ladies and gentlemen," Elijah began, his voice clear and commanding. "My brother and I are honored to be with you tonight. When we were invited to speak at the Wittmann Innovations Charity Gala, we knew this was an opportunity we couldn't pass up." Isaiah stepped forward to stand beside his brother. "For those of you who aren't familiar with our work, we've developed software that can detect early markers of various cancers through a simple blood test with an accuracy rate of 95%. This technology has the potential to save millions of lives by catching cancers before they become untreatable." The audience applauded enthusiastically. Ralph watched, his tension momentarily overshadowed by genuine admiration for what his sons had accomplished. "But tonight," Elijah continued once the applause had died down, "we want to talk about something more personal. We want to talk about why we created this software." Ralph felt his chest tighten. This was it. The moment they would expose him. "5 years ago," Isaiah said, his voice softening, "we lost our mother to breast cancer. By the time it was diagnosed, it had already metastasized. The doctors told us that if it had been caught just 1 year earlier, her chances of survival would have increased dramatically." A murmur of sympathy rippled through the crowd. Ralph felt a lump forming in his throat as he thought of Marge, suffering through her illness without him ever knowing. "Our mother was our rock," Elijah said, emotion evident in his voice. "She raised us alone, working multiple jobs to give us every opportunity. She sacrificed everything for us. And when we lost her, we made a promise that we would do everything in our power to prevent other families from experiencing that same loss." Ralph was surprised to feel tears pricking at his eyes. He had not cried in years, not since his own parents had passed away within months of each other when he was in his 20s. Back then, Marge had been his comfort, his strength, and he had repaid her devotion with betrayal and abandonment. "We've all been touched by loss in some way," Isaiah continued, his gaze sweeping across the audience. "And many of us have experienced the absence of someone who should have been there, but wasn't." Richard's breath caught. Were they going to reveal everything after all? "That absence can shape us in profound ways," Elijah added. "It can leave a hole that nothing else can fill, but it can also drive us to create, to build, to make the world better so that others don't have to experience what we did." The twins looked at each other, another of their silent communications passing between them. Then, to Richard's shock, Isaiah's eyes found his in the crowd. "We see that drive in the work of Wittmann Innovations," he said, holding Richard's gaze. "A company built by a man who, by his own admission, has no family. A man who has channeled his energy and resources into technological advancement and philanthropy." Murmurs of agreement sounded throughout the room. Ralph stood frozen, unable to look away from his son's penetrating stare. "Which brings us to the real reason we wanted to speak here tonight," Elijah said, drawing the audience's attention back to him. "Our company, Johnson & Johnson Medical Technologies, has been in acquisition talks with Wittmann Innovations for several months now." This revelation caused a stir among the business leaders present, many of whom had not been aware of these negotiations. "We've been hesitant to move forward," Isaiah explained. "Not because we doubt the business proposition, but because we needed to be sure about the character of the man behind Wittmann Innovations." Ralph felt as if he were standing on the edge of a precipice. One push and everything he had built would come crashing down around him. "We needed to know," Elijah continued, "if Ralph Wittmann's commitment to improving lives through technology and philanthropy was genuine or just a public relations strategy." The room had gone completely silent, all eyes moving between the twins on stage and Ralph standing stock still among the tables. Ralph could feel Cynthia's questioning gaze on him, but he couldn't look away from his sons. "Tonight," Isaiah said, "we've seen the impact of Wittmann Innovations' charitable work firsthand. We've spoken with beneficiaries of the foundation scholarships, with children whose lives have been changed by the medical technologies developed here, and we've observed Ralph Wittmann himself. Not just the public figure," Elijah added, "but the man behind the company." Ralph held his breath, waiting for the axe to fall, but instead, Isaiah smiled, a genuine smile that transformed his serious expression. "We're pleased to announce that Johnson & Johnson Medical Technologies has decided to accept Wittmann Innovations' acquisition offer with one condition." The tension in Richard's body shifted to confusion. This was not what he had expected at all. Our condition, Elijah explained, is that our cancer detection software be made available at cost to public hospitals and clinics serving underprivileged communities. We believe this aligns perfectly with Wittmann Innovations' philanthropic mission. Applause erupted around the room. Ralph clapped automatically, his mind struggling to process what was happening. They weren't exposing him. They were working with him. As the twins concluded their speech to a standing ovation, Richard's eyes remained fixed on them, searching for some clue to their true intentions. When they stepped off the stage, they were immediately surrounded by admirers and potential investors. But their eyes found Richard's across the room, and a clear message passed between them. This isn't over. The event coordinator announced a short break before dinner would be served, and Ralph seized the opportunity to slip away from the crowd. He made his way to a small private terrace off the main ballroom, desperate for a moment alone to gather his thoughts. But as he pushed open the glass doors and stepped outside, he realized he wasn't alone after all. Running away again, Mr. Wittmann? Elijah's voice came from the shadows. Ralph turned to find both twins leaning against the balustrade, their expressions inscrutable in the dim light. Why didn't you expose me? Ralph asked, cutting straight to the heart of the matter. Would you have preferred that? Isaiah pushed away from the railing and took a step toward him. No, of course not. But you're confused, Elijah finished for him. You expected public humiliation, not a business deal. Ralph nodded slowly. I don't understand what you want from me. What we want, Isaiah said, his voice now carrying an edge that hadn't been present during the speech, is justice, but not the kind you're thinking of. We're not interested in destroying you, Mr. Wittmann, Elijah added. That wouldn't bring our mother back. It wouldn't change the past. Then what is this about? Ralph asked, genuinely perplexed. Isaiah looked out over the city skyline, his profile so similar to Richard's own at that age, silhouetted against the night sky. Did you watch our mother die? He asked quietly. Ralph shook his head, shame burning in his chest. I didn't know she was sick. No, you didn't, Elijah agreed. Because you chose not to know. You signed those papers, took yourself out of our lives, and never looked back. I made a terrible mistake, Ralph admitted, the words feeling woefully inadequate. Yes, you did, Isaiah concurred. But the mistake wasn't just abandoning us. It was abandoning yourself. The part of you that could have been a father, a husband, a human being capable of love and vulnerability. The assessment struck Ralph like a physical blow. In all his years of success, no one had spoken to him with such brutal honesty. So what happens now? Ralph asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Elijah glanced at his watch. Now we go back inside. We have dinner. We play our parts. And tomorrow morning, you, Isaiah, and I will meet in your office to discuss the real terms of our arrangement. The real terms? Ralph echoed. Isaiah's smile was enigmatic. You didn't think it was just about making our software available to the underprivileged, did you? That was for the audience. Our private terms are somewhat more personal. Before Ralph could ask for clarification, the event coordinator's voice called through the open door. Mr. Wittmann, we're ready to begin dinner service. We'll be right there, Ralph called back, not taking his eyes off his sons. Just give us 1 minute. As the coordinator retreated, Ralph took a deep breath. Whatever you want. Money, positions in the company, public acknowledgement. I'm prepared to negotiate. The twins exchanged a look and then both laughed, a sound so unexpected that Ralph took a step back. Oh, Mr. Wittmann, Elijah said, shaking his head. You still don't get it, do you? This isn't a negotiation. This is a reckoning. With that cryptic statement hanging in the air, the twins moved past him toward the door, leaving Ralph alone on the terrace with the growing realization that his past had not just caught up with him. It was about to demand payment in full. The remainder of the gala passed in a blur for Richard. He went through the motions, making small talk, accepting congratulations on the acquisition announcement, smiling for photographs, but his mind kept returning to his son's words on the terrace. A reckoning. What exactly did they have planned? As the evening finally drew to a close, Ralph found himself watching the twins from across the room. They moved with easy confidence among his colleagues and friends, charming everyone they met. No one would ever guess the tension simmering beneath the surface, the decades of abandonment and hurt that connected the three men. "Quite impressive, those two," Cynthia commented, appearing at his elbow with 2 glasses of champagne. She handed one to Richard. "Their technology alone is worth the acquisition price, but their charisma is an unexpected bonus. They'll be valuable additions to the company." Ralph accepted the glass automatically. "Yes, they certainly will." Cynthia studied him with shrewd eyes. "You're acting strangely tonight, Richard. Ever since you met those boys earlier, you've been distracted. Is there something I should know about this acquisition?" For a moment, Ralph considered telling her everything. Cynthia had been his right hand for over 15 years. She knew nearly all his secrets, except this one, but the words caught in his throat. "The terms are a bit more complex than we anticipated," he said finally. "Nothing to worry about." Cynthia didn't look convinced, but she nodded. "If you say so. Just remember, I'm here if you need me." "Thank you, Cynthia. I appreciate that." Ralph finished his champagne in one swallow. "I think I'll call it a night. The car service will take you home whenever you're ready." He made his way toward the exit, deliberately avoiding the section of the room where Elijah and Isaiah were holding court. Tomorrow would come soon enough. Ralph arrived at his office at 6:30 the next morning, hours earlier than usual. He had barely slept, his mind racing with scenarios of what his sons might demand of him. Money seemed the most likely answer. Perhaps a larger stake in the company than the acquisition terms currently offered. Or maybe they wanted something more personal. A public acknowledgement of paternity, a formal apology, some grand gesture of reconciliation that would make up for 28 years of absence. Whatever it was, Ralph was determined to be prepared. He reviewed the acquisition paperwork, consulted with his legal team via early morning emails, and tried to steel himself for the confrontation to come. At precisely 9 o'clock, his assistant knocked on his door. "Dr. Elijah and Dr. Isaiah Johnson are here to see you, Mr. Wittmann." Ralph took a deep breath. "Send them in, please." The twins entered his office with the same confident stride they had displayed on stage the previous night. They were dressed in identical charcoal suits, though Isaiah wore a blue tie, while Elijah's was burgundy. The only visible difference between them. "Good morning, Mr. Wittmann," Elijah said as they took the seats Ralph gestured toward. "Did you sleep well?" The question was innocuous on the surface, but Ralph sensed the underlying mockery. "Not particularly," he admitted. "I'm eager to hear these real terms you mentioned." Isaiah settled back in his chair, crossing one leg over the other. "We've spent most of our lives without a father," he began, his voice matter-of-fact. "Our mother did everything she could to fill that void. But there were some things she couldn't provide. A male role model, financial security without working herself to exhaustion, the kind of opportunities that come from having a successful parent open doors for you. Despite that," Elijah continued, "we've done well for ourselves. We put ourselves through college and medical school with scholarships and student loans. We built our company from nothing with no family connections or inheritance to help us." Ralph nodded, a strange mixture of shame and pride welling up inside him. Shame for his absence. Pride for what they had accomplished despite it. "You've achieved remarkable success," he acknowledged. "Your mother would be proud." "She was," Isaiah said simply. "And now we're in a position to ensure her legacy continues." "What do you mean?" Ralph asked, leaning forward slightly. Elijah removed a folder from his briefcase and placed it on the desk between them. "These are our terms for the acquisition. The price remains as discussed. We're not looking to extort you, Mr. Wittmann. But instead of the standard stock options and executive positions you've offered, we want something different." Ralph opened the folder and began to scan the documents inside. His brow furrowed in confusion. "The Marge Johnson Foundation for Single Parents. I don't understand." "It's quite simple," Isaiah explained. We want 50% of the profits from our software to go into a new foundation named after our mother that will provide support for single parents and their children. Medical care, educational opportunities, child care assistance, career development, everything our mother struggled to provide for us on her own. Ralph continued reading, his confusion deepening. And this second document, you want to establish a scholarship program for children of single parents at your alma mater. Correct, Elijah confirmed. Full rights for deserving students who might otherwise never have the opportunity to attend medical school or pursue advanced degrees in technology. Ralph set the documents down and looked up at his sons, genuinely perplexed. This is it? This is your reckoning? You want me to fund charitable foundations? The twins exchanged one of their silent communications before Isaiah responded, not exactly. There's one more condition, a personal one. We want you to serve as the public face of these initiatives, Elijah stated. We want you to personally announce them, to be visibly involved in their implementation, to meet the recipients and hear their stories. In other words, Isaiah added, we want you to look into the eyes of people who have experienced what we experienced growing up without a father and see the impact of absence and abandonment firsthand. Ralph sat back in his chair, stunned. This was not what he had expected at all. No demands for money for themselves, no public humiliation, no scorched earth revenge. Instead, they wanted to turn his mistake into something positive, but they wanted him to witness it personally, to confront the reality of what his choices had meant for others. Why, he asked finally. Why not just expose me? Why not demand personal compensation for what I did to you? Elijah's expression softened slightly. Because that's not what our mother taught us. She taught us to create, not destroy, to build, not tear down. And honestly, Isaiah added, money can't fix what happened. It can't give us back the father we should have had all those years, but it can prevent other children from experiencing what we did. It can give other single parents the support our mother never had. Ralph felt something shift inside him, a wall beginning to crumble, a hard shell of self-protection starting to crack. Your mother, he said quietly. She really never spoke ill of me. Never, Elijah confirmed. Even when we found the divorce papers after her death, even when we realized you had abandoned us because you couldn't believe we were yours, she had left a letter explaining that you were a good man who had made a terrible mistake. She forgave you. Isaiah said, his voice catching slightly. We're still working on that part. The admission hit Ralph like a physical blow. Marge had forgiven him, even after everything he had done. And these young men, his sons, were offering him not punishment, but redemption, a chance to make something meaningful out of his greatest failure. There's one more thing, Elijah said, reaching into his briefcase again. He withdrew a small velvet box and placed it on the desk beside the documents. This was our mother's. She wanted you to have it if we ever found you. With trembling fingers, Ralph opened the box. Inside was a simple gold wedding band, the one he had given Marge on their wedding day. Attached to it was a small handwritten note in Marge's elegant script. For Richard, some circles remain unbroken, even when we think they're severed forever. Richard's vision blurred as tears filled his eyes for the second time in 24 hours. He had not wept in years, had not allowed himself that vulnerability. But now, faced with the evidence of Marge's enduring grace and his son's unexpected mercy, the dam broke. I'm sorry, he managed, his voice choked with emotion. I'm so sorry for what I did to all of you. The twins remained silent, watching him with inscrutable expressions. They did not offer comfort or immediate forgiveness, and Ralph didn't expect them to. Some wounds took time to heal. When he had composed himself, Ralph straightened in his chair and looked at his sons directly. I accept your terms, all of them. And he hesitated, then pushed forward, I would like the opportunity to get to know you both, if you're willing. Not as business partners, but as family. The word hung in the air between them, fragile and uncertain. Elijah and Isaiah exchanged another of their glances, and Ralph had the sense that an entire conversation was taking place in that silent communication. Finally, Isaiah spoke. We're not ready for that. Not yet. Maybe not ever. Ralph nodded, accepting the rejection even as it stung. I understand. But Elijah added, his voice marginally softer, we're willing to work with you on these foundations, and perhaps in time. He left the sentence unfinished, but Ralph grasped at the small offering like a drowning man reaching for a life preserver. It wasn't forgiveness. Not yet. But it was a beginning. As the twins rose to leave, Isaiah paused at the door. One more thing, Mr. Wittmann. The board meeting next week to finalize the acquisition. We'd like you to introduce us not just as the founders of Johnson & Johnson Medical Technologies, but as your sons. Richard's heart leapt at the suggestion, but he tempered his reaction, aware that this was a test of some kind. Are you sure? That would make everything public. Your lives would change. Our lives changed the moment we found those divorce papers, Elijah said matter-of-factly. We've had 5 years to prepare for this moment. The question is, are you ready for the world to know the truth? It was the moment of truth, the real reckoning they had promised. Was Ralph Wittmann, tech mogul and philanthropist, ready to admit to the world that he had abandoned his own children? Ready to face the judgment, the whispers, the potential damage to his carefully cultivated image? Looking at the sons who stood before him, accomplished, principled men who had every right to hate him, but were instead offering him a chance at redemption, Ralph knew there was only one possible answer. Yes, he said firmly,